So
Yeah.
now paper is by Takashi Onoda from Japan Bank for International Cooperation and Nicolas End. I thought he still working at the JBIC, but he went back to IMF. Maybe
Not
yes.
he's still on secondment in JBIC.
JBIC, right. But still, I think the IMF employment still continues, I believe. Anyway, so please, Takashi-san, go ahead on the capital flow paper.
Okay, and thank you for giving us this great opportunity to present our project. So this is joint work with Nicolas End, who again the secondment from IMF to JBIC. Unfortunately, he is not available today, so we can't answer the question during the presentation in chat rooms, but I'm happy to answer any question after the presentation. So now let's start. So our project is about causal effect of capital flows on recipient country, which should provide any policy implication about whether government should encourage capital flows or they should stop the capital flows. So this is our motivation. As probably most of you guys know, advanced economies and emerging market both receiving a substantial amount of capital inflows every year. So we prepared a graph at the bottom of this slide. So this covers 2000 to 2020, and each line is a BOP item in financial account. For example, and the y-axis is the level of capital inflows to GDP. And for example, the green line, which is direct investment to GDP, which stayed above 2% over 20 years. And also you can see the yellow line, which is other investments, majority of which is bank lending. So they is at a substantial level to GDP. And also we can easily see the big spike around the great recessions and small spikes over the years. So they are substantial, they are at the substantial levels and they are volatile. And as a result of keep receiving those capital inflows, the world's gross external liability now exceeds 200% of GDP, which suggests that global economy is reliant on capital inflows and susceptible to shocks in capital inflows. And also at this moment, we are now seeing the wave of interest rate hikes or quantitative tightening. So which should imply that we are expecting higher uncertainty around capital flows. So which made us interested in the causal impact of capital flows. However, we have limited knowledge about causal impact. So probably some of you guys, most of you guys know there's a rich literature about association between capital flows and the credit booms or economic boom or credit bust, those stuff. But the number of studies on causal impact is very limited. So as you can easily imagine, the capital inflows can be a driver of economic boom, but at the same time, this can be a consequence of capital or economic boom. So we need to specifically study the causality in order to understand the causality. And here we sorted out the previous studies results. The first set include the items that are reported have expansionary effect. For example, increasing real GDP or increasing credit growth, increasing investment. Let me explain the result by Blanchard and Davis. So Blanchard reported that non-bond flows have expansionary effects. But on the other hand, Davis reported that equity-based capital flows have no expansionary effect. And equity-based capital flows should overlap a lot with non-bond flows. So in our interpretation, that the previous studies haven't reached a consensus about which capital flows have which effect. So there's room to provide additional result. So our research question is this. The first point is about how does each type of capital flows have causal impact on recipient economies, for example, real GDP growth, real GDP or real investment or credit growth. And the second point is we are interested further whether those effects vary depend on the investment environment, like capital controls or the level of development. And today's presentation, we want to focus on the first point. And we tackle those questions by using reduced form panel regressions. And we propose a IB that is frequently used in economics in general, but new in this literature. In the following slide, I will detail this instrument variable. So let me explain the empirical methodology. So let's start with OLS model. So the left-hand side, delta U can be any dependent variable. And this FIT is a capital inflow in country I in time T. We include a country fixed effect. We include year fixed effect. So this is fairly simple regression model. And then obviously, this capital inflow is the endogenous variable, and we need an instrument variable for this. So what we propose is a shift share instrument variable, and so-called Bartek instrument. And in this Bartek instrument, we use the fact that capital inflow is approximated by the difference of investment positions. And specifically, this instrument variable ZIT is a product of two terms. The first term is kind of weighted average of growth rate of investor countries for country I. And the second term is investment position in country I in the previous year or previous period. And this share is the share of investor country J in country I in previous year in terms of investment positions. So this X dot IT minus 1 is the aggregate investment position by all countries in country I in previous year. So this is a share. And we multiply this share with growth rate of country J's investment position. But when we calculated this growth rate, we wanted to be more conservative. So let me explain how we construct this variable at the bottom of this slide. So this investment position of country J to the world, excluding I and T, is a summation of country J's investment position in country L, and which L doesn't include I and J. So when we, for example, when we construct the instrument variable for Japan as a recipient country, we calculate the US investment position growth rate that doesn't take into account the gross investment position of US in Japan. So by excluding Japan in calculating this growth rate, we try to eliminate as much endogeneity as possible in this instrument variable. I think this is fairly standard procedure when we use Bartek instrument in economics in general. So this is an explanation about data. So obviously we need a capital flows data, and all of them come from BOP by IMF. And in order to construct the instrument variable, we need a bilateral investment position information. And we use 4 different data sets for this. For portfolio investment, we use CPIS by IMF. This covers from 2001. But we use another data set, which is restated bilateral external portfolios by Coppola and his co-authors, which covers, unfortunately, only from 2007 to 2017. And basically, their data set is based on CPIS, and they restated the values in CPIS and try to show the value that reflect the effective portfolio investment. So specifically in some, they reallocate investment position in tax haven, and so restated the residence-based investment position to nationality-based investment position. So for example, when a Brazilian company set up a subsidiary in tax haven, for example, in Bermuda, And the Brazilian company subsidiary in Bermuda issues bond, and Japan's investors buy that bond. That appears portfolio investment by Japan to Bermuda in CPIS. But in this restated data set, that should appear as a portfolio investment by Japan to Brazil, skipping tax haven. By using this data set, we try to capture the effective portfolio investment. And for the direct investment, we use CDIS dataset, which covers only from 2009. For other investment, given the fact that other investment is bank lending is a dominant item in other investment, we use the international bank lending statistics by BIS. And in order to make use of those data set in a comparable manner, we decided to use annual data since 2001. And this is the first set of results of our regressions. So we focus on emerging market and developed economy. We use real GDP growth as a dependent variable. And this table contains OS result in the first 4 columns and IB result in the last 4 columns. So as you can see in the OS regressions, all the variables show the positive relationship with real GDP growth. 3 of them have significant results. But those significantly positive results disappears when we use instrument variable. And the only other investment retains a significantly positive result coefficient. And because we standardize the all variable by GDP, the interpretation of this result is this way. So 1 percentage point of exogenous inflow of bank lending as percent of GDP raise real GDP growth by 0.47 percentage point. I think this is economically significant result, given the fact that other investment to GDP sometimes reach 4%. And finally, I want to mention about the strengths of instrument variable. So we display the first stage effective F-stat. This is basically equivalent to first stage robust F-stat because we only use one endogenous variable. And F-stat is unfortunately weak for portfolio investment bond and weak for direct investment, possibly because of the smaller number of observations, or possibly because of economic characteristic of portfolio investment. But they are strong instrument variable for portfolio investment equity, and other investment in IB is pretty strong. And although I don't show the results, but when we have multiple capital inflow in the one regression, the instrument variable become weak, unfortunately. So next, I want to explain the results about real investment. Basically, the qualitative result and quantitative result are very similar to that of real GDP. So again, we show the OS result first and instrument variable result second. We can see the positive correlation in OS result as an only significant result in other investment. And the coefficient of other investment is again 0.47. So the size of impact is almost identical to that of real GDP. So this suggests the impact on real GDP is entirely through the impact on real investment. Okay, let's keep moving. And this is the last macro variable we present. We study the impact on credit growth. Qualitatively, the results again very similar or same. The positive correlation with credit growth in OS results, but the only positively significant result with other investment. But quantitatively, the size of coefficient becomes 0.99 for other investment in instrument variable regressions. So which suggests that exogenous capital inflow in the form of bank lending doesn't crowd out credit growth, local credit growth, doesn't crowd out domestic credit supply. And finally, in this series of table, we want to report what is the result with restated investment position. In this table, we use the difference of restated investment position as portfolio as capital inflows rather than directly use BOP items in order to capture the effective portfolio flows. And also we construct the instrument variables based on restated investment position in column 6 and 7. And by using this restated investment position, we need to drop a lot of observations, and our period covers only from 2008 to 2018. But still, despite the fewer number of observations, the first stage F statistic become greater in columns 6 and 7. And this is instrument variable based on restated investment position become stronger than that based on CPIS. And in terms of coefficient results, this doesn't produce significantly different result. So portfolio investment, bond and portfolio equity investment doesn't show significant result, significantly positive or significantly negative impact on real GDP growth. So far we try to see the impact on the macro variable in the same years, but now we try to expand our scope over impact on macro variable in the next years and possibly the following years, making use of Jordan's local projections. So we modified the regression model a little bit. So in the left-hand side is the cumulative difference of macro variable. On the right-hand side, we keep including the capital inflows. We include the lags of dependent variables and independent variables. And we keep using fixed effect, so country fixed effect, time fixed effect. But in this regression, we wanted to be more conservative, so we included region year fixed effect. And today we present the results with restated investment position because this produced the strongest instrument variables. So this is the results. So let me explain the graph first. The top panels is about the portfolio investment, bond portfolio investment impact over the year. And X-axis is the year, the Y-axis is log points of real GDP growth. And in this regression, because of the fewer number of observations, we include advanced economies and emerging market both. The first graph shows impact by portfolio bond investment started to appear in year 2. And the size of that impact is around 0.3 or something. And the impact is significantly positive. And that impact stays positive in year 3. And this result is quite similar qualitatively for real investment. The impact started to appear in year 2 and start to rise in year 3. But the size of the impact is greater in real investment. The coefficient reached 1.5% in year 3 compared to 1.4 or 0.5 in real GDP. So bond portfolio investment impact started to appear in year 2, which is significantly positive. In contrast, when we look at the portfolio equity investment, they don't show any significant result in real GDP or real investment. And yeah, so we have very clearly different result depending on the type of instrument. Next slide, we try to see the heterogeneous impact across advanced economies and emerging markets by not imposing the same impact by capital inflows. Specifically, we prepare the coefficient specific to advanced economies and coefficient specific to emerging market while keeping both groups in the sample. So the top panel shows the impact on advanced economy is pretty negligible. They don't any response to capital inflows in real GDP, in real investment. On the other hand, the response is basically positive in emerging market because we double the number of endogenous variables, the standard errors become greater, these regressions. So the gray shaded area, which is 90% confidence interval, becomes bigger this time. But nevertheless, the impact of real investment becomes significant in year 2, which is about 2% or something like that. So the impact in emerging market tends to be significantly impact in emerging market becomes significant in terms of real investment, and more in general, the impact becomes more greater in emerging market compared to that on advanced economy. So let me conclude by wrapping up our findings. So the impact of capital flows are not uniform. It depends on the type of instrument or type of capital flows. Also, it depends on recipient countries. And in terms of type of inflows, we first report that other investment shows causal impact on real GDP, real investment, and credit growth. And impact on real GDP growth and real investment is pretty sizable, which is 0.5 percentage point by percentage point increase of bank lending. Also, the result about credit growth suggests that exogenous foreign capital inflows doesn't crowd out domestic credit. And in the second set of regression results, we show that over years, bond portfolio investment has positive impact on real GDP and real investment. On the other hand, portfolio equity investment doesn't have such an impact. And when we compare the emerging market and advanced economy, as you can expect, the impact become greater in emerging market. And finally, we want to point out the potential policy implication based on these findings. So capital controls may be, the optimal capital controls may be type specific. So they should maybe focus more on bank lendings, and particularly for emerging markets. So far we haven't specifically treated capital control in regressions, or we haven't controlled the capital control in regressions, but we are planning to do that in the next steps of our project. So we will brush up our policy implication based on the future regression or future exercise results. But we are looking forward to your feedback and comments about our findings so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the discussant is Professor Xiang Gao from Shanghai Business School.
Yes.
Can you share screen?
Sure. Wait a second.
Okay.
Is my screen coming through?
Great.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Xiang Gao from Shanghai Business School. And it is my great pleasure to participate in the second conference of Rising Asia. And it is also my pleasure to comment on End and Onoda's paper, Should Governments Encourage Capital Flows? And I believe this paper has important contributions to the identification of the causal effect of how capital flows affect the domestic economic development in recipient economies. Okay, so let me first summarize the motivations of this paper. It was well established that there is a connection between foreign capital inflows and domestic economic growth. However, the exact single way, short run causal effect imposed by different types of foreign investment to a list of economic growth indicators in different countries have not been well studied. So this paper solves this problem by utilizing an instrument variable approach to mitigate the two-way causality problem. And this paper also solves this problem by controlling for indirect flows and other important controls so that no common driver is omitted. Okay, and about the finding of this paper, the paper documents that international capital flows can indeed cause economic growth in recipient countries, especially several years after the inflow. And the paper also has some interesting heterogeneity analysis findings. Okay, the authors find that these effects become more prominent for bond and other investment inflows, and more prominent for promoting real GDP growth and domestic investment. And also those effects are more prominent for emerging market economies. And below are my major concerns and minor concerns. Okay, so basically number one and number two major concerns are the same. Okay, so after the authors employ I-way approach, we observe that the magnitude of the coefficient for other investment goes up to 0.47, if I remember it correctly, okay, which is more than twice of the previous magnitude of coefficient estimated by the OLS. So this implies that the I-way approach is more likely to be correcting the errors, the endogeneity caused by measurement error. So although you have compared the significance of using I-way instead of OLS, I would like to see more discussion about the change in the size, the magnitude of the coefficients. Okay, this is my first concern. Okay, my second concern, actually third, okay, is about the reasons or mechanisms for bond being more helpful than equity in recipient countries. And why are real economic outcomes being more affected instead of the nominal or unemployment or other economic goals? And why it is the effect is more prominent in EMEs. So because why I propose this concern is that intuitively speaking, those different findings is connected, associated with different intuitive explanations. So I'm a little bit worried that whether there exists a consistent underlying explanation for all the findings from heterogeneity analysis. Okay, and finally, I think it would be helpful if the authors can compare the magnitude of short run and the long run estimated coefficients. Okay, so how are short run results related to long run results, especially when other long run factors, for example, institutional quality, comes into play in the long run. And my conjecture is that there should be a inverse U-shaped effect for some type of investment, and there will be a increasingly important effect for other types of capital inflow. Okay, and for my minor concerns, I have 4 minor concerns. First of all, I'm worried about the contemporaneous effect, which lacks economic foundation. Given that the benefits of those flows are assumed to materialize in a few years. So why are we studying contemporaneous effect, given that our ultimate goal is to identify a causal effect? Okay. And secondly, I am a little bit worried that some of the heterogeneity analytical results could be potentially related to how the instrument variables are constructed. Okay, and third, there are different sources of data for constructing bond and equity position proxies. Are there a role for statistical discrepancies? And at last, what about the effect of deglobalization, as evident by trade disputes and Brexit and other kind of political events? Okay. And finally, for not minor but nano concerns. Okay, so it would be better if the estimation results and the methods in past relevant studies can be summarized into one table that go to appendix. This would be helpful for readers outside this field. Okay, and the authors can also discuss about the motivation of investment. For example, if I am a foreign investor and I am a speculator, I would more likely to utilize a bond investment. Okay, so and I would try to stay away from equity investment. So of course, in the short run, I expect that I have no return or I have no interests. Okay, if I use long run investment tools, and anticipating this concern, the local government would respond by implementing some policies. So my intuition is that your results has something to do with the motivation of investment from the perspective of investors, foreign investors. Okay. And subsection 4.4 is actually a combination of repeating exercises in the tail parts of your sample in various dimensions. However, why performing those exercises are not well explained. Okay, so are you trying to mitigating another bias? Okay, and number 4, the question of should governments, local governments, encourage capital flows? I think this question might be too broad for the current results. And I believe local governments think more about the inherent characteristics of their domestic economies rather than the benefits of international capital flows, especially short-run benefits. And to better answer this question, we have to also discuss the cost of receiving foreign investment. Okay, and okay, I take 10 minutes to summarize the paper and give my comments, and I hope it is helpful and you can further improve your paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Onoda-san, can you respond to the discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for very helpful comments and feedbacks. That's exactly what we wanted, so very appreciated. And in terms of each specific comment, I think, we share most of those concerns. And the first comments about if I understand it correctly, is about the size of coefficient becomes larger in this instrument variable regressions. That's something for sure what we should address in the future draft, and explain what's the possible concern, or maybe we should control some more variables to solve this problem or phenomenon. And the second comment about mechanism, bond versus equity, or emerging market versus advanced economy. And I think it might be natural to most people that the impact on emerging market is greater than advanced economy, given that assumption or presumption that advanced economy is a capital buyer or demand capital flows. Though maybe there is a Lucas paradox like what Sensei is studying, but basically emerging market needs more capital, so there should be a bigger marginal return from capital increase. But in terms of bond versus equity, for example, Blanchard's paper basically about the theory about this part, and they provided kind of empirical support of this, which is very opposite to what we found or what Davis found. So we try to find a good mechanism if possible. We would include the potential mechanism in paper, though we don't think we can fully develop a model, but we can discuss that kind of potential mechanism. And short run versus long run, and that would be a great comparison or great further investigation. And the problem with studying the long run in the multiple years is the standard errors tend to be very great, too huge in 4 years after the shock or 3 years after the shock. So that's why we limit our scope up to year 3. But as far as possible, we try to compare the result of short-term impact and long-term impact. And the fifth point, contemporaneity effect. So basically, that's the first set of results I present today in the tables. I thought that is a good starting point to explain the results and showing which instrument variable is strong and which is not. But I agree that eventually we end up with local projection. Maybe we can start with local projection, and we can also explain the strength of instrument variable in those regressions. We can definitely think about that presenting way. Statistical discrepancies, basically the BOP, BIS, and CPIS, if I understand correctly, they share the same statistical standards. Probably there is the IMF stuff in this room, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But for the CDIS, the statistical method is a little bit different, but we use that only in the instrument variable, so not in the second stage variable. So this doesn't damage the resultable estimations. And the restated investment position is obviously use different standards. So we keep use them in the second stage variable and also instrument variable. And the effect of deglobalization, that should be an interesting topic to study by using this method. The current empirical model employs the year fixed effects. So I'm not sure how we should present our result in that context, but we definitely think about the deglobalization effect after getting the regression results. And I agree with putting literature review in the appendix a little bit, and also the discussing the motivation of investment. And also, sorry about the section 4.4. We basically ran out of time to detailing the results, so we should have removed this part from the draft. Sorry about that. Also, I personally agree with too broad title. So yeah, we will think about how to, which is the appropriate title for this project. Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Any questions from floor or online? Yes, Ichibe-san, please.
I noticed you have some concern about using residency-based statistics. So now I'm curious why use locational banking statistics instead of consolidated banking statistics. That's it.
Okay, so yeah, it's not the concern, but we want to capture both. But actually, the honest reason is we started to study about portfolio investment. Recently, we add the result about BIS statistics, and we started with residence-based and residence-based statistics, which is location-based LBS. And if there's a nationality-based LBS, like bilateral investment position data in BIS, we would probably use it as well. So thank you for suggesting using that.
Thank you. And I have just I don't know, maybe just a small comment on globalization and capital control issues. So some of the capital flows, I believe it's kind of exogenous, in a sense, exogenous, or they're reflecting policy changes on easing or tightening of capital controls or other regulation issues. Some of them are totally endogenous, up and down of capital flows. And maybe somehow could be differentiated. That's my first comments. And then all the literature, lots of globalization, liberalization literature, usually looking at more like event study when they liberalized what is happening and so on. And then there one thing it is captured is that especially on the risk sharing, with the risk sharing, international risk sharing getting better because of more liberalized world, then it's not necessarily means growth going up. That's also we do know in the mechanism, right? Because without risk sharing, country needs more probably precautionary savings. But precautionary savings for developing countries means higher growth. So that under those, so that when we have a liberalization, maybe precautionary savings gone because of better risk sharing, and then growth, economic growth slow down because of that. However, the welfare of the people going up, but the benefit is a little bit more than just the GDP growth in this case. And also other issue is that like yesterday's Roman Lancier's talk also, like August paper showing risk sharing maybe means people, entrepreneurs taking more risk. I mean, each country has more shifted toward higher risk and higher return projects. That means maybe volatility of GDP going up. That is maybe cost, but the overall benefit maybe have to think both higher volatility and higher growth. That kind of overall benefits have to be looked at the same time in a sense. So those are already quite written substantial amount of papers in the past. But of course, now we have this bilateral capital flow data. So how we can approach on top of that is a question, I think. But anyway, that's just my comment. We maybe better I hope to talk to you more. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Yeah, could you a little bit explain about the first point a little bit more?
Which one?
How differentiate capital control?
I mean, in a sense, the endogenous and exogenous up and downs of capital flows, right? Possibly. One is that suddenly is capital control or something suddenly eased, then there's a kind of exogenous inflow surge, possibly, or on the other hand, there's an endogenous movement, endogenous ups and downs and capital flows are always there. So perhaps they are different. Perhaps not different, I don't know. Maybe you could figure out. That's my first point.
Thank you.
Yeah.